Welcome to Miley Media. Today I'll be sharing stories with you from the subreddit Let's Not Meet. If you haven't subscribed, you should do so now. Make sure you comment, share, and like these videos. Let's jump right in. Number 1. So this happened to me almost 7 years ago now. I should give some background info before getting into things. At the time this all happened, I was around 16 years old and I had a friend that I'll call Karen, who was dating a boy named John. At this point in time, Karen and John had been dating for maybe 6 months, and after going out with Karen and John on many occasions, they decided that they wanted to hook me up with John's friend. We'll call him Cameron. At this point in time, I had met Cameron in person once. He was nice, so I gave him my social media, and we had chatted a couple of times. It's important to note that he didn't have my number or know where I lived. Now it's time for the story. Fast forward to one night, maybe a week or two after I met Cameron. I'm laying in bed, it's about 2 or 3 in the morning, and I get a call from an unknown number. Thinking, why the hell is this unknown number calling me at this time of night? I decide to answer it and see who it is. So I answer the phone and I say hi. A man responds saying hi back. Since I didn't recognize the voice on the other end, I asked the person who they were. Instead of giving me an answer to this question, the man on the line tells me to look outside my window. Thinking this is probably a prank, I tell the man to F off and hang up the phone. Once I did this, the number called back again, but I didn't answer it. The person then proceeds to call me another 4 times until I finally answer the phone, which I ask again, who the heck is calling? This time the person responds and tells me that one of my friends gave him my number, and that he was the guy that I've been talking to. At this point, my stupid 16-year-old mind is trying to rationalize this, and the only person I can think of is Cameron. Before I can say anything to this person, he again tells me to look out my window, that he's outside, and I began hearing noises outside my window. Now I should mention that my room is right beside my parents' room, and stupidly, my first thought was that this fool was going to wake them up, and I'd never hear the end of it. Let me tell you, that thought soon turned into the last thing that I would worry about that night. Anyway, at this point I'm also starting to get creeped out. I'm thinking to myself, okay, if this is Cameron and Karen did give him my number, how the hell did he know where I live? So I reply to the man and say, Cameron? The man says yes, and then tells me to look out my window. I reply telling him to go away and hang up the phone. So a little creeped out, I decide that I'm going to get up, go to my basement and call Karen, so that hopefully my parents don't hear me talking from my room. This is really important, because I get into my basement, I have to pass a door that is partially made of glass. So I get downstairs and call Karen. She answers clearly half asleep. I tell Karen about the unknown call, which I'm assuming is from Cameron, and how he is telling me to look out my window because he's outside. And on top of this, I can hear someone out there. Karen, now clearly awake, tells me she has never given Cameron my number or address, and calls John quickly from her phone to see if maybe he did. At this point, John answers and tells Karen that not only had he never given my information out, he is with Cameron. They tell me if somebody's outside, I need to hang up and call the police immediately. So I hang up the phone, and before I can even go to dial for anyone, I get another call. Guess who? Unknown number. So I stupidly answer again, and before I get a word in, the man tells me that he knows I'm in my basement. He saw me walking by my back door. Now I'm clearly disturbed, and as I did just walk by my back door to go downstairs, so I know someone is outside. Again, before I could say anything, the man tells me to come outside. So stupidly, I tell the person I'm calling the police, and I hang up the phone. Why I didn't call the police at this point, I really don't know why. Probably because I was 16, stupid, and literally in panic mode. Not more than a minute later, I get another call. Unknown number. I answer again. The man tells me to come outside or he's coming in. Clearly panicking at this point. I have this deep gut feeling that if I go outside, I'm never coming back. However, I do have to go by the door again to get back upstairs, and that was equally as terrifying to me. So I hang up the phone, and I again muster up the courage to run upstairs, because the last place I wanted to be was in the part of the house that no one else was in. I get more calls. Unknown number, unknown number, unknown number. Again, my 16-year-old stupidity answers. This time the voice on the phone sounds shook, and says to me that the police stopped him outside my house and want to speak to me to make sure I know him. The phone then gets passed off to someone who identifies themselves by name and some title that I no longer remember, and asks if I know the man outside my address. He says my house number and street. I quickly tell the voice on the phone that I don't have any idea who that person is. I never got another call again. However, I did sit there all night holding a bat and had problems sleeping for months. I should also mention, I didn't have many friends at this point in my life, and looking back on this night, I thought maybe this was a prank taken too far. However, I begged the few friends I did have for months to admit that one of them were the person who pulled this off. And to this day, they all insist none of them did this. So whatever got this person to stop calling me, thank God. And to the unknown caller, let's not meet. Number 2. When I was around 6, my parents divorced and my dad was given full custody, as my mom is an alcoholic and racked up a few DUIs and such. Anyway, me and my younger sister and my dad, moved to a new neighborhood and we transferred to the nearby elementary school. The school was pretty close to my new house, maybe 5 to 7 blocks away. Close enough to walk, but my sister and I, also a girl, were too young to walk alone. Sometimes our dad would walk us to school in the morning and then we'd walk back. And less commonly, he'd walk to pick us up, but most of the time, he picked us up in his black Mazda. The way pickups worked at my school was pretty common. We went out with our class, stood by our teacher and classmates, and when a car pulled up, designated staff members would ask who the student was that they were picking up, and then go find them, and escort them to the car. Seeing as my mom was in jail at this time, the only person who ever picked us up was my dad. One day, I was in 3rd grade, and my sister was in 1st. We were outside waiting to be picked up. After being outside for only a few minutes, my little sister came over to me and said someone who wasn't Dad was in the car to pick us up. He said both of our names, and they found her first. She said he'd smiled at her and told her that our dad told him to pick us up that afternoon. But she said she wanted to find me first before she got into the car since she didn't recognize him. Thank God she did that. Our dad had always told us not to talk to strangers. So I grabbed my teacher and told her what happened. She got a really alarmed look on her face and told us to stay where we were, while she told another teacher or something. Our dad arrived to pick us up a few minutes later, and we got home safely. We told him about it, and we all had a long talk about safety protocol. He asked my sister to describe the man the best that she could. Although my sister was very young, she wasn't very focused on important details like that. A few weeks later, it happened again, but this time he said my name. My dad had given the school the same info he'd given the police, but presumably he had multiple vehicles because my sister said he'd been in a red car and this one was black, similar to my dad's. I caught a glimpse of the face before I opened the door and hopped in. He was a middle-aged, really pale, with a really angular face. We made eye contact and his mouth was smiling, but his eyes looked really wrong to me, squinty and almost angry. I turned back towards the carpool assistant who delivered me to the car to alert her, but by the time I did, the car was gone, and I couldn't give many details. My dad contacted the police again, but without a license plate, they weren't able to do much. The last time I saw him wasn't until months later. Near the end of the school year, I was walking home with a big group of kids that lived in my neighborhood, and he drove by us and slowed the car down to try to talk to us. I recognized his face immediately, and alerted the other kids to run. Luckily, we were only about 3 houses down from where one of my friends lived. So we all piled into her house, and concerning her parents significantly as we explained the situation. I never saw him again after that. My dad started dating my now stepmom, and we moved to her neighborhood and switched schools shortly after. I still think about him occasionally. His face was actually in my dream a few nights ago, which reminded me to write about my experience. To this day, I'm in my 20s now. I don't know how he knew our names. I don't know how he knew anything about us. It's very fucking scary to think what would have happened to my tiny little sister if she'd gotten in the car with that man, and what might have happened to me if I had. To my childhood predator, please, let's not meet. Number 3. A few years ago, I was working in a hub, where lots of different entrepreneurs had a space and you were always meeting new people. I met this executive director of a very well-funded research center that funds a lot of projects, and they were visiting our space as a part of a project that we were working on. We got to chatting, and he said he would love to meet up and chat about what I was working on and talk about career tracks. I was a new grad, so it sounded good to me. So I met up with him at a coffee spot and we talked about work. It was fun and normal. Then I got a text from him asking if I wanted to go to a soccer game with him. We could chat some more about the projects and career steps. I kinda thought it was a little weird, but was also flattered that someone with his stature was interested in me and what I was doing. Plus, sounded more fun than coffee. My parents thought it was kinda weird that someone at his level would be interested in an entry-level person's work. But he was also a professor, and I was eager to network and make connections, so I didn't think too much of it. And sometimes these people have alternative motives and try to poach you, and I find that whole experience exciting. Anyway, before the soccer game, he wanted to go for drinks, and then made a comment about how I wasn't dressed for a soccer game. I wore business clothes, because this was a business endeavor to me. He didn't want to talk about anything work-related, and kept asking me about my family and personal things. Then after the game, he wanted to go for drinks again. I said it was late and I had to go home because it was a work night. The whole situation was just starting to feel off to me. Like he was starting to touch my arm and stuff, which was not necessarily inappropriate, but it just felt off. I had that gut feeling, when something feels weird and you're not too sure why. He was probably 60 years old and I was 24. Maybe he was lonely. He said he had fun and hoped that we could hang out again. Weird thing to say, but I wanted to be polite. Again, he held a lot of clout in the area that I was working in, so I knew I had to be careful in how I reacted, and didn't want to make a big deal out of it if he was just trying to be friendly and provide some mentorship to a young professional. The next day, I was chatting to the lead researcher on the project we were collaborating on this funding agency, and I mentioned to him that this guy had asked me to go to a soccer game with him. I asked if there were things that I should be mentioning to him. They were shocked and said that in all their years of research, they've only ever been asked to go out for coffee. Once. So that's kinda weird. Like, why would you be interested in me, and not in the work that the specialists and leaders were doing in this field? So I mentioned it again in passing to our CEO, who was female, and she just raised her eyebrows, and said how weird it was, and wondered what he was after. He never asked me to meet up, and this is the one of the people that started the hub I was working in. So this guy texted me again after this, asking me to go to another soccer game with him, because he had season tickets. I told him that I already had plans and couldn't make it. He asked me a few more times after that, but then he stopped. Anyway, I'll never know what he was after, and I stopped working on those projects, so I have not seen him again, but I can only imagine how awkward it will be if I ever do. So let's not meet again. Number 4. Last year, after a blissful first year of living in a new apartment all on my own for the first time, a man moved in next door that I will never forget. For context, I previously had a very lovely woman living next door to me for the entire first year I lived there, who never crossed this balcony threshold without being explicitly invited. I only throw this in there so that you can understand I wasn't previously concerned about someone infiltrating my space. The first time I met this new neighbor, he was unloading groceries from his massive truck into the assigned parking spot next to mine. As I was driving up, he and a girl I assumed to be his girlfriend were unloading boxes from Costco. I noticed them speaking, and as soon as I was out of the car, they went silent. I nodded to them, proceeding to the elevator, and the guy ran up behind me, threw some boxes down, and begged me to wait. No problem. I'm a good neighbor. While in the elevator, the girlfriend refused to make eye contact or speak to me. A little weird, but I just thought she was shy. But he quickly introduced himself and was extremely chatty. In the 45 seconds it takes to get to the floor where our apartments are, he asked how I liked the place, where I was from, and where I worked. Looking back, his enthusiasm was a little strange, but I chalked it up to him being excited to be in a new place. For the sake of the rest of the story, let's call him Sam. Sam was maybe 33, 6 feet tall, with a slim, muscular build, and his hair was buzzed extremely short, as if to mask his balding. Pretty average looking by all accounts. The first few weeks we'd run into each other often, and he'd always make small talk, and always referred to me as Miss. I assume it's because he forgot my name and wanted to be polite. I almost never see his girlfriend after the first night, but occasionally I can hear him talking to a lady in his apartment as the walls are reasonably thin. One night, about 3 months after Sam moved in, my boyfriend is spending the night, and we were watching movies on the couch. It's maybe 11:30 at night. The back of my couch is against the wall that I share with Sam, and we hear some banging noises. My first thought is that him and his girlfriend must be getting it on. My boyfriend and I laugh, and turn up the volume a bit to drown them out. Then, in addition to the banging, the neighbors begin screaming, and we can hear objects being thrown, glass shattering. The words are muffled, but there is distinctively anger and crying going on. My boyfriend, the gem that he is, steps onto the semi-shared balcony and his loudest voice yells, "Everything okay in there?" The girl opens the sliding glass door on Sam's side a minute or two later and says, "Sorry about that." So we left it alone. I'm concerned, but we have no idea what was actually going on and decided to go to bed. Big mistake. I wake up at around 3 a.m. to more screaming, but my boyfriend refuses to wake up, and I'm not about to take my 5-foot self to break up whatever is going on at 3 a.m. I'm considering calling the police, but was so drowsy I convinced myself I dreamed it. I deeply regret that decision. The next morning, I woke up to some terrible personal news, an entirely unrelated death of a friend, and pretty much put the events on that night on the back burner. I didn't forget, but it also wasn't on my mind. Fast forward about 2 weeks. It was a warm day, and I'm outside reading a book in a robe, sports bra and some shorts. I'm in a chair that faces away from Sam's apartment, so I can't see his side from where I am. I'm deep in my book when suddenly I get tapped on the shoulder. Sam is standing behind me and asks if we can talk for a second. This man has already crossed an invisible line by coming on my side of the balcony, but I can't get to my door without physically moving him aside, so I ask him what's going on. He told me it was his birthday and asked if I knew where to get some weed because I seemed like a girl who knows how to have a good time. As we live in a state where weed is legal, I told him that I'm sure Google would provide the best dispensary in the area, but I personally didn't have any. He proceeds to tell me how drunk he got last night, and at this point I'm itching for an exit. As I start to move, as if to signal I'm done talking, he reaches out for my shoulder and tells me he scratched my car last night because he was driving. Very, very wasted. Remember his massive truck? He says all of this with a smile on his face, almost laughing. I'm surprised, but mostly want to get away from him because my creep senses are starting to tingle and I don't want to blow up at him for hitting my car. He says he'll send me his insurance info, if I give him my number. And thankfully, I knew that that would be a bad call. I make a bad and nervous joke about knowing where he lived and said if the damage was bad enough, I would knock on the door to get his insurance. He counters by saying he will leave a note with his info on my door. He retreats from my balcony while also saying he'd prefer to just pay me cash and not involve the insurance company. I give it an hour or so and then I head down to assess the damage. I did this because I didn't want to walk down at the same time as him. Risk having him follow me. Sure enough, there are 2 long scratches on the driver's door. They're not deep, just kind of superficial, or worthy of a call to the insurance immediately. I really just didn't want to get involved with him in any way, so I decided I could deal with the scratches, but this little event has kind of shaken me. At this point I know something was off with him. Nothing unusual happens as far as I'm aware this night. The next day is Saturday, and as I had work the next day I'm home alone, watching some action-y movie around 11. I'm on the sofa with my cat curled up on me, and the movie is relatively loud, so it takes me a little while to register the banging noise that's coming from the hallway of my apartment building. I honestly only noticed because my cat had woken up and got all puffed up and freaked out. I turned down the volume of the film, and suddenly the banging gets louder and louder, and just as I stand up, I hear the 5 words no one wants to hear coming from their door. "Open up, it's the police." My stomach dropped to the floor. I had lied to Sam the day before. I totally had weed, and I had smoked a joint outside on the balcony, the part farthest away from Sam's, maybe 20 minutes ago. I'm totally panicked, high as a kite, and trying to control my breathing so I don't immediately come off as suspicious before I answer the door. I remember checking the peephole to see a close-up of a cop's face, and then opening the door, coming face to face with 6 officers, all guns drawn. I am about a half a second from completely pissing my pants in fear, still convinced somehow I'm in trouble for smoking a joint. The officer who seems to be in charge can sense instantly the level of my panic and says, "Ma'am, you're not in trouble. We need to speak with you about your neighbor. Can we come in?" At this point I'm reeling, and my whole being is tense. I let the cops in, but my heart hasn't moved from my throat. The policeman in charge asks me about any interactions with Sam. I tell him I barely know him, that he just lives next to me, only moved in a few months ago. I ask why they needed to be in my apartment. I'm scared, but also don't typically get along with cops, and I have the right to know why 6 of them practically waving their guns in my face. The lead officer proceeds to tell me that Sam is a bad man. He apparently beat his girlfriend so badly the night prior she was now in the ICU for her injuries. They also told me Sam had a gun and had barricaded himself in the apartment next to mine. They said that they had spoken to the building manager and knew my place had access to his balcony, and they needed to use it. They asked me to go into my bedroom and lock the doors and turn the lights off. The next 30 to 45 minutes were absolute hell. In my panic, I had left my cell phone on the kitchen counter and had to sit in my room just listening to the commotion. No shots were ever fired, but there was a lot of yelling and what sounded like things being thrown. Eventually, after what felt like a lifetime, the main officer knocked on my door and told me that Sam had been arrested, and thanked me for letting them use my apartment. They asked me questions for about maybe 15 more minutes and then left. I wish this is where the story ended, but there is a bit more. In the following days of Sam's arrest, I became even more panicked about him coming back to the apartment building, worried about retaliation. I hadn't said anything to the police to technically incriminate him. I had proof of nothing except his word that he was the one who scratched my car. But I did tell them about the night my boyfriend and I heard them fight. About 5 days later, Sam reappeared at the building as I was coming home from work one evening. He tried to approach me, but the elevator shut just as he was running to catch it. My whole body got tense, like the feeling when you come this close to getting hit by a car, and you narrowly avoid it. I stayed off my balcony entirely at this point, always kept the curtains closed. We didn't speak or really see each other at all for another few weeks. And then we had our final interaction. Sam stopped me in the parking lot one night, running after me. I was about to get on the elevator. He begged me to tell him why I let the cops in that night. I told him the honest truth, that I was stoned and didn't know what to do and had bad history with cops. This is all true, and again I was concerned about him trying to retaliate. He then got pretty upset and kept trying to repeat the question, obviously wanting a different answer. When I couldn't give him one, he then offered me $3,000 to testify as a character witness on his behalf, because I knew him, and knew how he really treated women. I was speechless and very freaked out. He told me his hearing was next Thursday morning, and he asked if I could show up. I was like a deer frozen in headlights for a moment, and then somehow got the hell out of there, after mumbling a string of words that were most likely incoherent. The Wednesday night before his trial, I came home from work and my cat was acting kinda weird, like something had just spooked her and her tail was puffed out. I kinda shook it off, but I noticed through the curtains that there was something taped outside the sliding glass door. Apparently, Sam had left a post-it with his phone number and name, and underneath it says, "I'm counting on you." Needless to say, I never showed up. I took a photo of the post-it, grabbed my cat, locked all my doors, and stayed at my mom's house for about 5 days after that. I did phone the police to let them know he had been on my balcony again, but they never followed up with anything. Eventually, my boyfriend came, and we went into the place together. Everything was as it should have been. I never saw Sam again. But a few weeks later, a lady I had never seen before was cleaning out his apartment. Maybe a month after that, new people moved in, and things returned to normal. I tried calling the police and the county jail to see if he was in lockup again, but no one was able to release information to me. I'm hoping that means he's there, if he did what the police said he did. So, to Sam I will say, I'm not really sure what happened, but my biggest regret is not calling the police when I felt like I should have in my gut. Let's never meet again. Alright guys, if you made it this far, I appreciate it. And do not forget to subscribe, comment, and share these videos with all your friends. I'm going to do a giveaway when I hit 100 subscribers, so the first 100 will be entered into the drawing. I know the stories are a little longer today, but I enjoy longer stories sometimes myself. So I appreciate everybody for being here. See you next time.